And what I found is something that really resonated for A players in my field is that they love that balance of being able to work from home and have a home office. Those are my staff, those are your staff, that's everybody's staff that has a child or a family member that has an intellectual or developmental disability. And so if we're not all thinking about how can we keep these individuals in business to support our families, it eventually affects business as a whole. If that integration of that mission is not felt in every capacity, that's where they fall away because they don't feel seen or heard.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive, hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. So go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, we are fortunate enough to have a very multi-talented woman. We have Kathy Lehmeyer on The Growth Switch. He is a powerhouse entrepreneur. She's a community advocate. She's built multiple powerhouse-driven ventures, including 8 that we discussed earlier. She mentors other ventures. She's got a 2-time Inc. 5000 recognized care agency, Kids Northwest, also a boutique support services firm. She uses businesses as a vehicle to uplift families, professionals, and underserved communities. Powerhouse of a human. Kathy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time. All right. So, for a lot of people on this podcast, they've founded a single company. It's kind of their baby. They've nurtured it. Somehow you have found the time and energy to successfully found, own, operate 8 different businesses. How is this possible?
Well, it's not just me. I have an incredible team. I have an incredible team that see the mission and also bring other ventures to me when it aligns with where we're going for all of the companies that we're involved in. And it wouldn't be possible without everybody on my team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, team is the way to go. And speaking of teams, you help people bring team members to their team to help support their business. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. We actually just launched a company a couple months ago called Moonbow Resources. Mm-hmm. And it was designed with the intellectual and developmentally disabled community in mind. Something that I was noticing as I owned the care agency was that group homes would come into business. They would establish their business, find families to move into their location, build out their culture, build out their resources, hire their team. And maybe due to not understanding every aspect of what they should know or not having all the resources they should have to be successful long term, you see a lot of group homes close. And what that does is those families that moved in, they then spiral because they have to find a new location. The care team has to find new employment. And so it's really disheartening to the community when they open and close so quickly. And so what we brainstormed was that some of the things that those owners face might be that maybe they were a caregiver and they did really well. So they found the means to open up a group home, but maybe they don't understand marketing or they don't understand how to have people find them, such as having just a basic one-page website. Or perhaps they don't understand the recruiting aspect or the business financial portion of that. And so with Moonbow, we are starting off as a care staffing agency for any person-to-person direct care, as well as support staff, whether that's admin or front desk staff, any of those pieces. And the care level varies for each one of those caregivers. And then that also branches off into other admin support. We'll be offering billing resources here shortly, as well as other options that'll help them stay in business so that we can stabilize the community.
Yeah. And that's so much more than just supporting businesses so that they can remain profitable. It's really so that they can remain functional and serve that very important community function that they're serving, to take care of these people who really need that type of care.
Yes.
I read an interesting statistic that, over 65% of people aged 65 and older end up needing long-term care at some point in their lives. So this is, a lot of times I think we think, oh, but, it's not going to happen to us or, not my family, not my parents, not myself. But really, when you look at the math of it, when you look at the statistics, that's not the case. This is a critical function in society.
Yes. And that's more senior care, which is my other previous life that I held. I was in senior housing for just shy of 10 years. And before I got into the IDD community to support that community, and you do see that statistic that is real, it's relevant. And the cost for the state that I used to reside in Oregon, For that state, you saw the average cost was $7,000 a month for rent and care for a family member, and that's on the low side. And so when you look at those needs for seniors, it's growing, it's evolving, and most do not have a plan to take care of that resource. They are thinking they're going to rely on Medicaid, they think they're going to rely on Medicare, but that's a different option. And so when it comes to the intellectual and developmentally disabled community, for that aspect, 17% of the population is diagnosed with an IDD. Another 17% is believed to be undiagnosed. And so when you look at that, that's over 30% of our population. And so if we're not actively thinking of ways to stabilize that population, that in turn affects our workforce, because those are my staff, those are your staff, that's everybody's staff that has a child or a family member that has an intellectual or developmental disability. And so if we're not all thinking about how can we keep these individuals in business to support our families, it eventually affects business as a whole.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now it sounds like, you've definitely got this interesting approach to it of, not just attracting the top talent, but also making sure it's a culture fit, because it's not just enough to bring the right person to the right role. They may be an expert at it, but a lot of these jobs, especially that you're talking about, involve real human care. So how is it that you go about like finding that good culture fit, a person who cares about the role and really wants to be there and enjoys their job?
I like to believe that anybody who applies for the job has some inkling of excitement or curiosity about being a care provider or offering support in a care setting. Where that tends to change or shift is the culture that's in that environment. And oftentimes what we find is a lot of the caregivers that come in, it's trial by fire. The intention is there for proper training and support and resources for those individuals that are starting in a care community or doing in-home care, going from location to location. And then business happens and things fall off. And if there's not support for those administrators to pick up those pieces or bridge that gap, then you also find gaps in care and gaps in the resources and the connection of those resources. And so in that, what we find is that caregivers tend to fall away. They don't see the mission. They don't feel the mission. They do not feel part of it. And so really understanding that if you have a turnover issue, it's generally because your mission isn't connecting. You can have the greatest intention, the greatest idea of what you want to provide with your care company, care home, or even retirement community or assisted living or memory care. But if that integration of that mission is not felt in every capacity, that's where they fall away, because they don't feel seen or heard. People are not changing jobs for $1 more an hour. They're not changing for a 401k. They're not changing for PTO. Those are just the straw that broke the camel's back, right? That's the piece where they're like, I have all of this and I want that. And so while those things are important and necessary to support your entire team from a holistic level, really it comes down to, do they feel part of your mission? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel involved? And if you can isolate that and improve that, you'll attract the caregivers or the staff in any industry that you need.
Yeah. And that sounds like a reverse engineering way of approaching this. I think a lot of founders, a lot of people who own these businesses out there looking for the perfect person without thinking to themselves, well, maybe I can change my company and create the environment where the perfect person would want to come to me, versus like, I want to pay that extra $1 an hour or whatever benefit that they want, that they need to get that right person, but to get the people who want to be here, who love doing what they do.
And it's designed that way on purpose to reverse engineer. We reverse engineer everything. It's actually something that my team hears me say a lot. When you were a kid and you were given that maze, which looks like your backdrop there, and you're trying to find from the start point to the end point, we always start from the start point and we hit all of the blocks and blockades and we eventually find the way to the end of that maze. But if you just start at the end goal and work your way backwards, it's the fast track to the path with the least amount of resistance with the greatest amount of gain for all parties involved. And so if you can look at whatever it is that you're trying to impact from that stance and go from what is the outcome I want and work backwards, it's a lot easier to understand your starting point and what needs to shift specifically. Because if we start at the beginning with the end in mind, there's not a clear path. You end up with those little micro changes or shifts that are going to maybe further clarify your direction, but it's not going to get you there the fastest with the least amount of risk or the greatest amount of gain. So I think that's really important. The other piece about attracting the right client the right staff member, it's really understanding you're trusting these individuals with your baby. You're trusting them with your vision, with your mission, with your blood, sweat, and tears. There's equity that you've put into this, whatever your push is, whatever your mission is. And culturally, it's really important to understand where you're going. It's important to understand what is the outcome you're trying to accomplish. And that's more than just your KPIs. That's the feeling, that's the execution. That is, what are you being remembered for in that moment with that specific need or want? And then you shape it from there. And what I found is that if you're honest with your team of if you're ever out of alignment with the mission and this is no longer for you, let's have a conversation so that we can get you in a position or with a company that makes you feel like a rock star. Because if you're not aligned with the mission and this really isn't fanning your flame as a human, there's a point where you're going to disconnect, and without even realizing it, you silently quit. And that's just human nature. It's not intentional. It's not disrespect. It's none of those things. It's just how we operate. But our call and our mission is, if that ever starts to resonate within you, let's have a conversation before you self-destruct, and let's find you what's going to make your heart sing.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a passionate person with so much energy, clearly you have found your own fit, or I should say fits, with the number of different things that you're doing. You're kind of dancing this line between advocacy and impact. So how do you balance how much you're able to give as far as the community service with running multiple businesses and still being able to make a profit?
Yeah, I think they all work together. If your mission isn't aligned for the greater good of all, your profit's going to be there. I had a mentor early on in my career by the name of Bill Sheriff, and he was the CEO of Brookdale Senior Living. And he had a core value of, if you put the client or the resident first, the bottom line will follow. And that really resonated with me. And it was so powerful in that organization because we could cite that at any moment to say, please tell me how this is putting the resident first. And that stuck with me in a way that now I understand that if I'm in alignment for the greater good of all, I don't have to worry about my profit margin. Obviously, I still look at my financials. However, there's boundaries and guidelines that keep me in a profit margin there. Everybody's rowing in the same direction on my team.
Yeah.
And the advocacy part comes because we can. Oftentimes we see something that needs to be addressed. Perhaps there's a break in a system, a break in a value chain, a resource that isn't realized, or perhaps it doesn't exist. And so oftentimes whenever you hear, well, someone should do something, my mom used to say, well, you're someone and you can do something. And so it's really understanding who I am as a human, what's important to me and my family and my nucleus to keep me whole and keep my family holistically well in every aspect. Then on top of that, we add business. Business is a secondary to that. The work-life balance piece, I used to say it all the time. And what I realized is that there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's work-life integration. And if you are very clear where you need to be with your family nucleus, where your business nucleus is, and all the hats that you wear, it becomes very easy to identify on your balance wheel, if you will, if you've ever done that chart where you rank, in each area of your life, if you're a 10, a 5, whichever. We do that regularly. So if you have that and you lead by that, you can understand that maybe at this point in time, business is taking up a lot of my time and effort. And so in order to shift over here, I need to reassess priorities. And you're in that constant evolution of, where is my human growth? Where's my business growth? Where's my advocacy growth? And what am I trying to accomplish in all of those? And as long as you're taking a weekly peek at that, you don't veer too far, right? If you're a pilot and you fly from LA to New York, you're not checking your instruments as you get closer to New York. You're checking it every step of the way, because only one slight variance will take you hundreds of miles away. And so it's just being very clear at what you want, what you're trying to accomplish, and then making sure that everything falls within those guidelines, not creating the business or your life first, and then trying to shove it and make it fit in those guidelines, if that makes sense. Start with the end in mind again.
Yeah, very much makes sense. Brilliant strategy. And then also it feels like maybe your businesses are a bit in a virtuous cycle. They can feed each other. So in other words, having access to top talent and a lot of really great people, you can probably hire some of the best people for your own companies. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'm pleased with the team that we have. We have a lot of tenure on our team, both internally and externally in all of our divisions that we have. One of the companies that I started is called the IDD Resource Guide. And it was created because we saw that we have in every state, there are hundreds of thousands of resources for families in the IDD community. The of love and compassion that is poured into that community is just it's inspiring. However, most families are going through it in the moment. They don't have a chance to reach out of their tornado to ask for help or even realize that they need help or if a resource existed. And so we created the guide to then put all of those resources together to help the families help themselves and help everybody within the support structure find those resources and get them to families, as well as businesses and legislation and first responders, you name it, right? It's just a solution that didn't currently exist at the level that it is. There's a lot of small micro guides. Some of them are outdated. Some of them, might be funded and managed by the government. And then maybe that department slides to the one direction or the other. This guide is meant to be a one-stop shop for everybody. The other piece that we noticed in that was that there was a need. When most families are going through the process of getting a diagnosis of an intellectual or developmental disability, and this is relevant to business, it takes years to get the diagnosis. It takes years to then get the assessment and then find out you may have resources. Once you have all of that, in most cases, you're handed a list. Please call this list of 100 plus caregivers that might work for your family. It's not the most efficient resource, right?
Yeah.
So currently one thing that we're creating is a resource where caregivers can post their expertise, their experience, and their schedule that is going to give them a holistic balance for their life. So they stay a caregiver longer and don't change the industry, as well as give the families the opportunity to have a profile and advocate for themselves to find the right caregiver, as well as agencies as well. So now, rather than getting a list and having to call 200 people, we're creating an environment where you can self-serve and we can create balance and support faster for these families. And so it's the same approach we have with all of our companies, right? If there's a need, we start with that outcome of what should this look like? What should it feel like? How should it function? How should it resonate? And then we build it backwards. And so in every aspect of what we do, that's how we approach it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, apparently it's working.
Yes.
Yeah, creating comprehensive support and solutions for complex problems, and with IDD, absolutely, and with your own business, absolutely. So, how do you approach growth for your business? It looks like you have a two-part model, which is number one being of support and being helping out the community, but then as far as like how do I just the numbers, growing my own business so that I can continue to have a positive impact on the community. What's your strategy for finding the right people to work with?
Each one of the organizations that we have is completely different by way of growth. When it comes to the care agencies, there's a need we're filling. And as long as there's a need, we're going to continue to push to find the resources we need to ensure that they have the support that they deserve. In the other organizations that we have, again, as you identify that need, right? Business is about finding a potential problem or challenge or obstacle and creating the solution that creates value, creates perhaps revenue or a profit for the creator or the solution finder, and then gives them the opportunity to thrive in their mission. And so for business, when you're looking at a growth model, you're really looking at what is sustainable long term, because I can build something right now based upon what I'm faced, but I'm going to have to recreate it over and over and over again because it's based upon what I'm facing right now. I believe a lot of business owners or even entrepreneurs, they have the dream, they have the excitement of, I want to get to this in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, which is a great goal. However, they're not designing their organization based upon when I get to the 3-year, 5-year goal and work backwards. So when we first started Kids Northwest, what I noticed, we were already remote. We created everything remotely. My experience is in remote working, both in senior housing as well as now with the IDD community. And what I found is something that really resonated for A players in my field is that they love that balance of being able to work from home and have a home office, whether it's the lack of commute, the savings they get. I believe it's like $12,000 a year a remote worker saves. from commuting, gas, insurance, all of those things. And I get the same results by them being a remote worker versus being in an office with the overhead of that. So that's one piece. The other piece is in that growth strategy is what worked for me with 100 caregivers and 100 families is not going to work for me for 400 caregivers and 400 families plus. And understanding that difference. And so I believe it's both. Most entrepreneurs want to dream big, but they're afraid to plan big. And you have to plan big. You have to think, when I'm at the 3-year mark, this is where I need to be structurally for my operations, for my communication, my training, my automations. You have to think, if I've got 500 of these same scenarios, is this process going to work? And in most cases, it's a no. And it's a lot easier to take a 500 person or whatever that number is, right? Like say it's sales or contracts or acquisitions or partners. Take that number of where your ultimate goal is to be in the next 3 to 5 years and start there. Build your entire infrastructure based upon that, your support team based upon that, obviously keeping in mind your margins, and build it out that way so that as you're building, it only makes sense that now you're going to stack on this and now you're going to stack on this. And it's not a complete remodel of how you address things.
Yeah. And I think that most businesses aren't currently do that. What they do is they hire as needed.
Yes.
Okay, we've grown too big. Now we are reaching a problem, and now we're hiring to solve the problem versus we're hiring proactively to solve the problem before the problem exists.
Yes, reactionary leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. As a leader, we have to forecast. We have to be the visionary, and we have to be the constructor to set that structure in motion so that all you have to do is backfill it versus the other way around of always thinking about, oh no, now we're here. Now what? Now what? Now what? If you think long term and work your way backwards, a lot of those obstacles are eliminated.
Yeah. So where can people find this type of support? You have a number of different companies. So now's a great time, now that people have been hearing all about you and what you're able to offer. How can they best connect with you and your various companies? And a caveat to that, just look down below. All of the links are going to be right there. But I do want to hear it from you, Kathy. How do people connect with you?
Yes, we do have 8 companies and I have 2 that I mentor, and it just depends on which one that they're looking for. If they're interested in more insight or guidance or even resources that might connect them based upon things that we've discussed here, they can just go to lehmeyerdevelopment.com, and there's a link at the bottom to contact us and reach out, and we'll get in touch and give them any resource that we
and
have
that's
available.
Comprehensive. That includes all the things in one easy link.
Correct.
Cool. That makes it very easy. Great. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, for sure.